Hi, everyone. It's Mike Morse. As you can see, I'm back in my office. We are taping some more open mics. And today we have an interesting one because many of you know I have three daughters. But today's author and guest is an expert on sons. And I'm thinking, well, why should I have that on my podcast? And then I remembered I'm a son. So I wanted to learn what my parents did right, what they did wrong, what we could all do better to raise our children. Mike McCormick created a program called ManQuest. And the purpose of ManQuest is for fathers and their middle school age sons to explore and discuss issues to help the sons grow into men. That sounded great. He also founded McCormick Basketball, which is a wildly successful youth basketball program in Bloomfield Hills. And he's recently moved down to beautiful Naples, Florida, where he is running a ginormous brand new senior living center community down there. So he's got lots of things going on in his life. We appreciate his time, and let's welcome Mike McCormick to Open Mic.
You never know who you're going to see,
Be one guy one-on-one my whole career.
what you're going to hear,
Got a lot of desperate people in the city.
or what they've got to say.
When you can take people inside of a crime.
That's what you're going to hear on my podcast, Open Mic. Find it where you find your podcasts.
How are you?
Doing great here in sunny Florida.
Two mics on the podcast.
I know.
How was your
Should I
move
call-
down to
should I-
Florida?
Should I call you Michael or should I call you Mike, or how do we differentiate here?
Well, since it's open mic, you might as well call me Mike.
All right,
And
sounds good.
I'll call you Mike, and we'll get through this.
We'll get through it. Okay, we know who we're talking to.
So you wrote a book, Mike, and created a program called ManQuest. What is ManQuest, and why should we care, and why is it so important?
Yeah, Mike, it's really a important movement that rallies fathers and adult men in our community and our society to engage teenage boys in intentional conversations about the journey to manhood and authentic masculinity. You know, there's so much misinformation that's out there that our boys are getting bombarded with 24/7. And really what this provides them with is a trusty paradigm that helps launch them on the journey to manhood. And so it's been really successful over the last 10 years. Thousands of fathers and sons have gone on this journey. And just really, mostly it's about a father or an adult man sharing kind of who he is, his heart, and a paradigm for masculinity that a teenage boy can take with him.
What are the hurdles that are in our way of preventing us from doing a better job raising our sons?
Well, I think mostly the culture really just bombards our kids 24/7 with these lies, fabrications, and distortions about what it means to be a man. And I think it's hard not to buy into it. The culture tells boys that to be a man, you have to be an all-star athlete, you have to make a ton of money, and you have to be powerful, have the most toys, the hottest woman, everything. And all these are the messages that our boys have been given since the time that they were little. You know, the strongest kid on the playground that can throw the football furthest or make the most amount of baskets or score the most goals is somehow elevated in our society as more masculine than others. And these are the messages that have been given for so long. So what ManQuest is really about is retraining our boys and our fathers and giving them a masculine paradigm that's reliable and trustworthy and creates clarity.
And I imagine social media isn't helping over the last 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Raising sons with I know what social media like raising daughters, but raising boys is probably just as bad, if not worse.
Oh, it's amazing because, you know, I have two sons who are 23 and 20. And when they were just kind of entering into their middle school years, they still had flip phones. And so I can only imagine, you know, being the father. I also have an 11-year-old daughter, so she's getting ready to kind of follow your daughters into the next phase. But man, they have it 24/7. You know, all the misinformation that's now being sent through social media, as well as their misinformed friends on all these different topics, is just creating a ton of confusion. And teenage boys have 1,000,001 questions about what it means to be a man. What is the journey to manhood? I know I did, and that was, you know, many years ago. You know, I remember being in middle school boy and looking up at my dad and going, how am I ever going to be a man? And what is a man supposed to say and do? And how is a man supposed to conduct himself? And more importantly, do I have what it takes to become a man? And so this is really that opportunity for an adult man to really answer some of those questions and align that young man. So his journey, he at least understands and has that paradigm for the future.
Well, some dads might be listening to this and thinking, it's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not really sure how to do this. What's your best advice of getting over that getting out of that uncomfortable zone and talking to your son?
You know what? I tell you what, Mike, there's been so many fathers over the years that have taken this step, but it's a difficult step because I think you have to become vulnerable and you have to let your guard down with your son. And I think as dads, a lot of us, we just want to be on that pedestal. We want our sons just to think that we're amazing. But taking that step is the first thing. Just do it because it's so important. And every man has the stuff to give his son what he needs for the journey. But it's just that first hurdle of taking that big step.
Lots of parents, including yours truly, struggle with wanting to be friends with their kids versus being that person, who's able to discipline and hand out the tough love and give great advice. How do you advise the fathers and the mentors that you coach and through your book and in other aspects? How do you advise them that about the difference between being a friend with your kids versus being a parent?
Mike, I think that's been a struggle for me because I have from day one told my boys, you have a lot of friends. My job description is not to be your friend. My job description is to raise you to be awesome men in this world. So you have a ton of friends and we have fun and we engage, but my job is to raise you up and to be the father. And sometimes when you're a buddy father, the lines blur too much. And so, I've tried to do both, but I lead with being a father, and being a father means making the tough calls. It means providing those boundaries, the structure, and really providing the direction. And so, I really listen. I love to have fun with my boys, but my number one responsibility is to provide the guidance as their father. So it's a tough balance. And I tell you, when I look back and, as my boys are older, I look back and I say, gosh, should I have been, kind of more that friend buddy guy? And I really look back and say, gosh, when I'm seeing them mature into the adults that they're becoming, I'm thinking, gosh, that was really the right course. And although it's hard because there's all sorts of dads that are, want to be the cool house, and the cool house is doing stuff that I wouldn't approve of, and I look like a stick in the mud, and that's tough. But in the moment, but I think in the long run, being a dad is first and foremost.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. The friend aspect, I struggle with that with my daughters. We have a ton of fun, and we work out together, and we cook together. We do all these things, and I wonder about that. Tell me, is there to the ManQuest program? Is there a religious aspect to this program?
No, there isn't. I think it's definitely spiritual, and it definitely is something that I think any father or any religious person or any non-religious person can pick up ManQuest and sit down with their teenage boy and talk to him about it. The book is designed for people of all faiths or no faith. And what it really does is provides those conversations and the dialogue and the opportunity to discuss things that you wouldn't normally discuss. And in that might come faith, might be part of that, but the conversations are between the father and son. And what my job is in writing the book, and I'm also doing Zoom sessions as well to lead fathers and sons. I just finished up with 50 fathers and sons doing a Zoom call. And what it does is creates an environment for the fathers and sons to have conversations that wouldn't normally happen.
What is authentic masculinity?
Well, that's one of the things that I have struggled with my whole life. And, I wrote this book 10 years ago, and what I remember this. I remember sitting down and saying, hey, I want to talk to my sons about what it means to be a man. And I remember sitting down with a pen and a piece of paper to say, okay, what's my paradigm for masculinity? And I sat at that table with that pen and paper and stared at that for a long time. I didn't have a great concept as a 45-year-old man of what authentic masculinity looked like. So I went on a deep dive to say, okay, what is my paradigm? What do I believe a man says and does in this world? And what I did is boiled it down to 5 what I call guideposts. And guideposts are the actions of a man. They're the essence of a man. They're the North Star to point us in toward. And the 5 guideposts are pretty simple, and they're really the basis of the book. Each chapter is a guidepost with questions and guidance. And so the 5 guideposts are really simple. The first one is I call it lead courageously, which means that a man steps into difficult and uncertain situations and uses his strength and power to bring goodness to the world around him. The second guidepost I talk about is pretend about nothing. And this means that a man lives authentically. He lives in truth and requires truth of other people. He embraces his own uniqueness, and he's not trying to be like the other people, and not a chameleon, not trying to follow the crowd. The third guidepost is protecting your heart. And a man puts good things into his body, his mind, through our 5 senses. We put things that help to elevate us and not drag us down. The fourth guidepost is all about relationships, and it's engaging in deep and meaningful relationships. At the end of the day, life is all about relationships. Who do you love and who loves you? And men are not great at vulnerability and intimacy. And we talk about relationships with other men and how important that is, as well as how you treat women, which is crucially important. And then the last guidepost I'd call stay awake, which means that most men are sleepwalking through life, just going through the motions. And it's really all about awareness and embracing the world around you and stepping up and stepping in. And so, that's just the Mike McCormick paradigm that I use as a teaching tool, but it gives those boys and adult men and myself this direction to say, hey, this is how I want to live as a man. And so I can tell you that there are days when I don't live as an authentic man. There's days where I steer off course, but the guideposts really give me that direction, as well as the teenage boys and a lot of fathers.
Really good reminders. Really, really good stuff. Part of your book and part of your program, you talk about rugged truths. And I want you to give an example of those and how they impact fathers and the sons, and give us an example or two.
Yeah, so the ManQuest experience is really only takes about 10 hours. The first part of the program is really a father sitting down with his son, talking about his story. So the first thing the father does is share his life story, his ups and downs, his successes, his failures, his disappointments. He lets his son know who he is as a man and brings him into his world. And then every week we go through one of those guideposts where we'll sit down for about an hour and talk through, and fathers and sons will exchange conversation and have dialogue. And then they also do is watch movies together. Each guidepost has a movie that is associated with it. And then the last piece, once we talk to the boys about, hey, this is what it means to be a man. Here's a trusty paradigm. The last part is what I call the rugged truths. You say, hey, here is the goal. This is what we're all shooting for, to be an authentic man in this world. But here's the truth and the reality of being a man. It is not easy. It is tough. And so the first one is really about life. Life is pain. Life is hard. You're going to get knocked down. Life is difficult. And guess what? That's okay, because men do hard things. Men do challenging things. And it's really an important reminder. So the rugged truths are 6 points that basically just say, hey, you know what? Here's the goal, but this is what's going to happen. This is the reality of the situation. And I think by sharing those struggles with the boys, they learn that, guess what? When I get knocked down, I know that I need to get up. And guess what? My dad did that too, because I understand his story and what he went through too. And so it gives me confidence as a young man to say, gosh, when adversity hits, I have the stuff to be able to do it. And I know that my dad did it, or that adult man in my life did it. It could be, and I think that's one of the important things. there's so many homes don't have a father in the home. And so, coaches, mentors, grandpas, uncles, brothers, teachers, anybody can step into the life of a teenage boy. And that's really the most important thing I think about ManQuest. This is a rallying cry to all men in our society. If you have a young man in your life, grab ManQuest, take 8 to 10 hours of time, sit down with him and just have a conversation, a discussion, and impart to him some manly wisdom that he can carry on in his life.
Yeah, that last point is deep, and it touches home for me, because my dad passed a long time ago, and I was young, 20, 21, and he never really told me his story about his ups and downs. I felt I was close to him. He felt like my best friend at the time. I went to law school to practice with him, and as you're talking about his ups and downs through childhood, that would have been a good conversation. And the message I got was, don't wait. For me personally, and I actually think I do a decent job talking to my daughters about my childhood and the good and the bad. And but that's to me a really good message to the fathers out there. And and go ahead.
No, I would say, Mike, I grew up with an awesome dad. My dad's still alive, and he was involved in my life. He coached my sports teams, took me to church. He was home every night. We had dinner as a family. He was an awesome dad in so many ways. But when it came down to this whole journey to manhood thing, where I was clueless, all I really kind of got from him was a birds and the bees conversation, which fell far short. It fell far short of what I needed. And the thing that's funny about teenage boys is they're never going to ask you for this. They're never going to say, "Hey, Dad, could you talk to me about manhood and masculinity?" No, because of our cultural norms, teenage boys have to act like they have it all together. This has to be a gift that's given from a father to a son, and because teenage boys have all these questions, but they're never going to ask them. I know that I did, and gosh, what a difference it would have made in my life if my dad would have sat down with me and said, "Hey, here's who I am as a man. Here's where I've failed and struggled. Here's where I've succeeded in my life. Here's my best, the things I'm most proud of," allow me to know him in a certain way. And then to say, "Hey, here's what it means to be a man. You've got it, go to it." And I think launching me on that journey, or launching boys onto that journey, is something that's so important. That's why the book is called ManQuest, Launching Teenage Boys into Manhood, because teenage boys need to be launched. It's an active process. Manhood is taught. It is not caught. Men are made. They aren't simply born. And it's up to us, the men of our society, to stop abdicating our responsibility to raise up that next generation of young men.
Are the people that you coach and the people who you work with, are you finding that the boys want to talk about these issues, or is it something that you have to convince them that's important? Because sometimes when I try to get deep with my daughters and tell them a story, they're kind of roll their eyes or kind of want to move on to the next thing. So I'm curious how it is with boys.
Gosh, you know what, Michael? It's unique to everybody. Some kids just grab onto it, and fathers are completely surprised that their sons are into it. Some kids just are not maybe emotionally ready for it, or don't know how to express themselves with it. And so it's all over the board. But what I just really encourage dads to do is just keep in it with it. I mean, it's easy to quit when your son is quiet or isn't engaged. But that's why we also have the movie nights. Movies are a great instrument for father-son bonding, to share. So if it's uncomfortable to sit and have a conversation with your dad, the movies are a great way to unlock that. When I'm doing my Zoom calls now, I use movie clips to really engage boys, because the movies are really an important media for our culture. And so but what I do find is that if boys aren't ready at age 12 and 13, then stay in it. Stay in it with the conversations, because these are things they're dealing with 24/7, nonstop.
That's what you just made me think of something interesting. In the Jewish religion, 13 you become a man, right? That's it. There's not. It's wishy-washy. What do you see in your program? Like when are you seeing the boys entering manhood? Is there a definite number there, or is it different for everybody?
Yeah, I think I love the Jewish culture with the that rite of passage is so huge. Having that moment in time that says, you know what, you're there. It's time for you to move forward in your manhood. I think is so huge. But the thing that it's funny, the thing that I've learned over the years, I once thought that, this was going to be a program that makes boys into men. And what I've learned over the years is that manhood is a moment to moment decision. Manhood isn't this certain moment. I think most teenage boys, most people think that you hit this certain milestone and poof, you're all of a sudden a man. I don't believe that anymore. I remember, when I turned 16, I got my driver's license. I thought I was going to be a man and nothing really happened. Then I thought, the first time I had it for my first beer, then I was going to be a man. Didn't happen. When I graduated from high school, when I scored 20 points in my first game, I thought there was always going to be these milestones that were going to happen that was going to thrust me into manhood. And it never happened. And so what I've learned is that being a man is all about choosing to live as a man. And that's a daily moment to moment decision that we all have. And some days I don't choose very well. But you know what? The great thing for me is, and what's the guideposts have done for me, is it reminded me what is expected of me and what I expect of myself. And it's really funny because what I realized is when I wrote this book, I wrote it for my boys when they were becoming, 12, 13-year olds. But what I really realized is I wrote this book for myself because as a man, I need to be reminded of how I need to live as a man on a daily moment to moment basis.
So you mentioned movies. You and I have a mutual friend who introduced us. What are the best bonding movies that a father and son can to watch, and that just kind of gives you this automatic bond and this automatic connection?
I'll tell you what, I think it's I have my favorites, and I've watched movies with my boys over the years. And I can tell you that my favorite movie for teaching is Forrest Gump. And for some people, they don't like Forrest Gump. Most men don't like Forrest Gump, but I think he's an incredible character, a guy who, when I look at the guideposts, he wasn't this, the men don't like him because he wasn't the smartest guy, right? But he had an incredible experiences throughout the movie. But when you look at the guideposts, leading courageously, engaging in relationships, protecting your heart, pretending about nothing, and staying awake. He was the epitome of all of those things and of masculinity. So you look at Forrest Gump and he just looks kind of like a, dumb guy that just waddled through life. But I think Forrest Gump is a great teaching character. And I was watching that movie the other day with my 23-year-old son, and we were talking about Forrest Gump, and just I think he's awesome. I don't know if it's a great bonding one, but it's an awesome teaching one. I think the movie that I always love too is The Matrix. I know Matrix is 20 years old, but that movie still holds the test of time, and the kids love the action of it. The problem in today's world is there's not a lot of movies that have really great messages. There's not a lot of movies that most of the movies are superhero movies that are all about the action and less on content. And so I like some of the older ones. Dead Poet Society is one of our favorite ones too. And so there's a lot of great movies with a lot of great masculine messages.
I just rewatched the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh yeah.
With my kids, and
Awesome.
believe it or not, that I haven't seen that in 40 years. That translates to today, I think, and
Yeah, I agree.
it did stand the test of time.
I agree.
I think that was a great series, and then we went on to the Mandalorian, which I absolutely loved. Did you watch those?
We were watching that over the holidays. I was watching bits and pieces with my kids, but yeah, loved it. And also, I think Lord of the Rings is also a great one for the family as well.
Great suggestions. And you have a daughter now. Is that the next book? Woman's Quest. Is that next?
Well, I tell you what, it's interesting. I've had a lot of people talk to me about that, and here's the thing. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I'm a guy, and I can look at when I wrote those guideposts. As I told you, I was writing for my sons, but I was writing them for me. So I'm really asking my wife to do this. Christy is as you know, is really talented, and she'd be awesome at writing this. And so many people are asking her to do that. But women struggle with a bunch of different things. I think that guys don't struggle with. I think when you look at what teenage girls are struggling with in the body image and the perceptions of femininity with regard to kind of relationships, and it's a different set of circumstances than boys. I think boys need to have a very clear cut set of principles and a direction to head in during those middle school years. I think girls would do the same thing, and I think a ManQuest would be awesome. I just don't think I'm the person to write it.
Okay. Well, maybe your wife's going to become an author. Who the
I
heck
know.
knows?
I know. I mean, I look at it this way. I look at it like if I wrote a book on ManQuest, I'm just commenting from an outside observer. And it's really interesting because one of the things that's interesting about ManQuest is, I talk about fathers and adult men stepping into the lives of teenage boys. And a lot of times I get some flack from the women who say, well, how come I can't take my son on a journey to manhood? I don't have a man in my life, and I don't, why can't a woman teach a boy how to make that journey? And I really feel like it's important to have walked in those shoes to really talk to somebody about what it's like, and having another person, whether it's a grandpa or an uncle or a brother or a coach or a teacher, mentor, somebody to step in and say, hey, this is what the journey of manhood is like. This is what you should expect from a male perspective. And so I think that, that's been a constant encouragement of mine. And so I think it's really up to the men of our society. It's up to the men of our society to step up and give these boys what they desperately need. We need to step up and raise up the next generation of men because they're struggling, they're failing. Boys are falling behind, and they need this direction and they need this support so desperately.
Fascinating stuff, Mike. Really informative. I learned a lot. I look forward to reading your book very, very soon. If any of our listeners or viewers want to get more information, buy the book, join one of your groups, how do they get a hold of you?
So the website is www.manquestmovement.com. So that's the website. And you can also send me an email at manquestmovement@gmail.com. And also the book is on Amazon, so it's easy to just go on Amazon and get a copy, or go to the website. You can get a copy there as well. And it's really, I really believe that when you look at all the ills in our society, when you look at all that's happening, the number one issue in our society is that our teenage boys are not growing up to become men. There's all these little boys walking around in all these big boy bodies that never became men, and they're doing damage in our society. And if we do a simple thing like talking and teaching about authentic manhood and masculinity, I think it would take away so many of the social issues in our society. We spend so much on the back end, but we need to spend time up on the front end. I think we should teach manhood and masculinity with the same sense of urgency in our schools that we teach math and science and English. We should have a course for every middle school boy, high school boys, on what is the essence of masculinity, because I think that is the key to really tackling a lot of the ills in our society.
I don't disagree with you. I think we would be a much better off society if we could incorporate some of those things into our curriculum. Thank you for being so passionate about this and writing the book and doing what you do, Mike. And we'll put links to all of your stuff in our show notes. And so if anyone wants to get a hold of you, they'll be able to find it easily. And thanks so much for being on Open Mic today.
Hey, great being with you, Mike.
There you have it, Mike McCormick, ManQuest. I advise you to check it out. Even if you don't have a dad in your life, you're a single mom and you need some guidance on what your boys are doing and dealing with, that would make a good gift. That would be a smart purchase, in my opinion. I'm going to pick it out to learn how to, any way I could raise my daughters any better than I already am. He already gave us some great tips on sharing your personal stories. I thought that was a really, really good one. If you know anybody who would gain benefit from this episode, please forward it to them. Tell them about it. Comment, like it, subscribe to the Open Mic podcast. We're now over 2 million downloads and watches, and we're approaching that magic 100 episode number. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening and watching, and stay tuned for more.